Hi, my name is Matt Kosterman. As of 2026, I'm a 56-year-old white guy who lives in Chicago, Illinois. Over the past 10 years, I've transformed my life from one of chronic pain, depression, and financial struggles to one of freedom, contentment, and prosperity. I mean, sure, I've been known to get a little down at times, but hey, what human design projector isn't? I started this podcast to share with the world some of the amazing humans that have assisted me in my journey. In this season, I'm talking with more people who practice so-called alternative healing modalities. Basically, this is most things outside of what we know in America as the medical industrial complex. Shit is messed up around here, what with all the conflicting incentives. So my overall intention with the permission slip is really just to introduce people to other ways of relieving their suffering beyond taking a pill for the rest of their life. In this opening episode of Season 2, I sit down with Dr. Jodie NewDelman. She's a clinical psychologist with decades of experience in developmental neuropsychology, trauma, and psychedelic-adjacent care. We explore what happens when Western medicine meets subtle body awareness, when diagnosis meets intuition, and when systems built for symptom management begin to crack under the weight of our human complexity. We also talk about neurodivergence, ADHD, trauma, chronic pain, bipolar disorder, somatic symptoms, internal family systems, ketamine-assisted psychotherapy, and the profound intelligence of the body. This conversation moves fluidly between neuroscience and mysticism, between clinical rigor and lived experience. So if you've ever sensed there's more going on underneath your symptoms, more than maybe a pill can fix, this episode is for you. Thanks for listening. I wish you good health and prosperity. Today I'm privileged to be here with Dr. Jodie NewDelman, who comes to us from beautiful West Marin, California. She is originally from the Chicagoland area, so we shared that. And Jodie's a doctor of psychology. She's been licensed and working in the field since 1999. And today we want to talk about psychedelic-adjacent spaces and also the framing of the dysregulation of people and systems, and unwinding and integration. So, Jodie, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
That was a great intro.
Thank you. My notes worked.
Yeah.
So yeah,
and so much more.
And so much more. There, yeah, we should have fired up the mic about 20 minutes ago because we've gone down a couple rabbit holes already. And so
So it goes with the psychologist.
Right. All the rabbit holes.
Right.
Yes.
All the rabbit holes.
All the rabbit holes. So I'm excited to have you on because you do bring such a wealth of information from a variety of aspects of human development and growth. Let's just, I guess, start with, I always like to start with people's own stories and how did you land here? Because I find that there are many wounded healers, at one time wounded healers in this work who have found their way to right relationship with themselves through one form or another, or there's many paths to the same place. So just start there, your background.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because I don't really know what my chart says, but somebody just told me the other day that my chart was so clearly the wounded healer constellation of things. So,
what's your sign?
But thank you for asking.
What's your sign?
Okay, it's something about Scorpio rising in the 6th house or something like that. I don't really know, but I always love hearing the experts in those arenas share their spooky wisdom with me. And that's a great segue because, I'm a clinical psychologist, but I love that shit. It's amazing.
I
It's
just saw.
always,
I sorry to interrupt. I just saw there's a guy that I follow, Human Garage, who does myofascial work, Gary Linehan, and I just saw a blip on social media where he's worked with numerous billionaires and multimillionaires, and he said, what all of the millionaires and billionaires that I worked with have in common is that they all consult with astrologists and they all use homeopathy, and they don't want anybody to know that.
it is kind of this subtle body medicine, I think. I mean, homeopathy, I was also a skeptic until you see these things unfold and you're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
So I like to hold space for the things that I don't know or I can't confirm through the current forms of assessment and evaluation of things that are scientific. I guess that's, where there's this segue between the metaphysical and the hard and social sciences. It's just that question, the curiosity. What is it that we don't know, and how do we measure that? So that's definitely an intersection that I think is about it. It's important to integrate.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell us. So you you were born in Chicago, grew
So
up
I
in the
grew up,
area, grew up out here in the
yes,
flatlands.
I did. And I think I grew up in a fairly insular community. And my parents were divorced when I was about 7. So I lived with a single mom, and I had saw my father a lot. He was always traveling because he had a job that took him abroad a lot. So I traveled a lot to see other parts of the world that were not so insular, that were a taste of I don't know, global awareness. So I think I am grateful for that view outside of my bubble. But also, I had a brother that struggled a lot with some early childhood illnesses, and then later, I think behavioral issues, really severe behavioral issues, and then also some mental health and psychiatric issues, and eventually addiction issues as well. So being the I don't know, responsible party, aware, observer,
Older?
manager. Yeah, I'm the
You're
older
older.
sister.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah, so I think that was, without knowing it, my first experiences of learning, coping and adapting and being capable, right? Like someone's got to steer the bus, right? So, anyway, I think that's part of it. And I also sort of understood people that were othered or felt different from the norm in their community, right? I didn't feel like any of this was very normal. So just kind of identifying with the other, and then seeing people othered all around me, like when it was happening, right? I was just very sensitive to that as an observer of human dynamics at an early age, I think.
Because they dressed different, talked different, whatever, had different taste than the
Well,
mainstream.
you know what it was? In retrospect, I think I noticed all the people that were on the spectrum.
Okay.
Right before we had a name for that.
Yeah. The
right. I was just
sensitive
aware.
ones.
Yeah, I think I was just very aware of the fact that they were outside a range of normal social functioning, and it didn't seem like intentional or anything. I just recognized that very early in social settings, and then I went on to study that as a professional later, to study developmental neuropsychology and neurodivergence. My first postdoctoral position was in UCLA Neuropsychiatric Institute, studying the genetics of autism and the genetics of ADHD in families that had heavy genetic load in those ways. So, I started off really sort of hard sciencey, and really interested in brain structures and how they worked, and neuromodulation and the dynamics of the structures. And I do, to this day, feel very sad and upset by the fact that we all don't have coverage for baseline neuropsych evaluation, like early adulthood baseline measure, based on the number of people that have had head injuries or degenerative brain issues, where it would have been really handy. It is handy to know what their baseline capacity is, at the age of maturity, like say 25 or 30. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe 20,
So
20
anyway,
for the women, 20 for the women, 25 for the men, right?
Well, I mean, but as a psychologist, I go into every first session as a biopsychosocial evaluation, and I feel like we have missing information about developmental neurotypes, right? So there's like neurodivergence, and there's pathologizing way to understand that, and then there's just the way to understand all of us as having a flavor or a neurotype, whether it creates impairment or not, and how to kind of know your neurotype and work with it specifically.
Well, yeah, and impairment against what standard too, right? I mean, oftentimes it's because my view is it's because they don't fit into the mold that was created so many hundred years ago of the way our society functions, right? That you're going to go to school, you're going to sit in a chair for 8 hours a day, listening to somebody talk to you so that you can spit it back out again.
Right. And so, and we know that probably 30 to 35% of the kids in school today have more of a dyslexic style, whether they're actually defined or determined or labeled as dyslexic. They have that neurotype, which has a lot of assets, and it has some challenges that I could get into specifically, and what those superpowers are, and where there are deficits. And so, they benefit from more multimodal style of project-based learning, more visual, accessible, manipulative materials, but that everyone would benefit from that too, right? Like if that was just available to everyone, then those who would benefit would have it. So I think you're right that the systems are based on education and structure that's taught to the teachers and the leaders, right? So we have to be able to just educate and inform the systems that need updating when we have new relevant advances in science that demonstrates why it's better this way than that way.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, one of my guests a couple episodes ago was Dr. Therese Rowley, who's based here in Chicago, and she's for years, 35 plus years, she's known since she was a small child that she could speak with source, that she could see and she could hear, and she's worked in corporate change management for her whole career as being the catalyst and the focus of the change in order to absorb the energy and allow the people to. But she's also lately she's been working with the telepathy tapes people, because she can communicate with nonverbal people on the spectrum, and is able to see their gifts.
I think I heard that.
Did you listen to her episode?
I heard something about that. I will.
Not
that you say that, but I did hear somebody talking about that.
Yeah, so she's like, they have gifts. I mean, she works with a healer who you send him your photo and money, and you tell him what's wrong, and he works in the quantum field to correct it. And we have systems that would absolutely and utterly reject that as a possibility.
Okay, but here's my point: is that if you're amenable to that as a human, as a client, as a payer, right? As someone who is going to invite that form of learning and medicine into your life, then that's fantastic. I don't know if it's going to be the right lane for everybody, but maybe it would be, right? If all of the people were open to the possibility, right? If everyone will say, okay, yes, do you want to make a decision to have chemotherapy or not? Right? And some people choose not to based on some strong belief, right? Or some
Steve Jobs famously.
Right, exactly. But who's to say? Who's to say what's right for you? I don't know your neurotype. I don't know your biology. I don't know how connected you are to your inner healing instinct or your capacity. I don't know your openness to change your behavior. And I think that when you have an exchange, another person that's working with you, a healer of some kind, that run the gamut from a surgeon to a metaphysical channeler,
Right.
that you are having a partnership, an exchange of trying to understand this person's body and who they are in space. And my lane is kind of a thorough biopsychosocial. Give me all the information. Let's put this puzzle together. Let's look at the constellation of your life story. And, I can do the differential diagnosis with the DSM if we have to, but I don't think of that as being a hard, fast rule. I think of that as being sort of like symptoms that tend to hang together in a cluster. And yes, taking it within the context and the relational context and the cultural context in which it's occurring is all very relevant and valuable without naming it a pathology.
Yeah, 100%.
It's
like what?
So yes,
even,
but
right, even like ADHD. I know I've seen a movement to call it ADHC, right, as a condition as opposed to a disorder.
Right, and I would call it this confluence of a neurotype and a zeitgeist where everything is competing for our attention. And if you like, it would be weirder if somebody was able to like actually focus in these conditions because there's, it's like who's not having difficulty focusing, right?
The fire hose.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know anybody that's having,
Yeah, that's great.
real success with that. But that's not to just diminish what it is, because as I mentioned earlier, my first role was to do the phenotyping for a genotyping study on ADHD. And those were families that had, it's like if you've been working in the field as long as I have been and you sat across your fair share of, ADHD 7 or 8 year olds, you get kicked in the shins enough and you like figure out how to like work with this person in their own language, right? Like working with the ADHD is something that I'm very familiar with. But I think that clinical gut instinct, when you see it in such a raw form, it misses a lot of people. It misses girls that are tend to be much more internally distracted, or like spacey, so it is like sort of like an art and science of seeing what's pure and then also being able to differentiate between what's more likely the result of trauma, and stress and trauma on the body also looks like impaired attention, distractibility, restlessness. We see the same exact symptoms across PTSD. Yeah. So you have to be able to differentiate, or maybe it's both, right?
Both and,
but
yeah.
But frankly, like I also said earlier, it's a shame we don't have a neuropsych on everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we were able to kind of put it through more rigorous tests of certain kinds of attention, then we would know if it's like visual or verbal information, what kinds of information is problematic. You can get more nuanced and granular about the treatments when you have, or not even treatments, but just, skill building to be able to, and most of the skill building for ADHD and frankly, anything that's afflicted with attentional problems is mindfulness.
Yeah.
Right? Like we know that the yogis always knew that, but now we have data on it. Right?
On it, yeah.
So
the meditating monks at the University of Wisconsin with the Dalai Lama, right? And the gamma waves and whatnot.
Totally.
Did you ever, do you know who Sir Ken Robinson was?
Tell me.
Educator, philosopher, I guess, from the UK. And one of my favorite TED Talks, I haven't watched a ton of them, but he told this story about this young woman in the doctor's office, and her mother brought her in because she had trouble paying attention in class, and she was constantly getting distracted and acting out and whatnot. And the doctor, they were in his office, and he said, he put some music on and he motioned to her mother. He said, come with me. And they walked out and they left the little young girl and looked in through a one-way mirror. And after they left, she got up and she started sort of moving around the room and twirling and dancing. And he said, there's nothing wrong with your daughter, ma'am. He said, she just needs to move. And the woman in question was Martha Graham, the famous choreographer and dancer.
Mm-hmm.
She just needed to
Mm-hmm.
move. She couldn't be
Mm-hmm.
sitting in a chair.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So if we have child-centered learning, right? Responsive, prescriptive, constructive awareness of the whole child and their uniquenesses, regardless of how many kids are in that classroom, and you have, um, you know, intuitive group managers, teachers that know how to facilitate groups, much like a facilitator, a good facilitator of a ceremony,
A
right?
medicine ceremony.
They're or any kind of just group presence and being able to wrangle your people, knowing how varied and different they all are in their minds and their bodies, Um, yeah, I think that child-centered education, patient-centered, client-centered medicine work, client-centered medicine work, patient-centered medical care, that really is about contextualizing the bespoke healing experience for each individual. And that doesn't have to be as hard as it sounds, right? It's not your doctor's job to heal you. It's your doctor's job to enable your own healing.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I mean, it took me a while, but I now firmly know from personal experience that there is an inner healing intelligence in each of us. And maybe you can speak to bringing that out. I know that it's, again, to your point, the doctor doesn't heal you. The shaman doesn't heal you. The chiropractor doesn't heal you. The name on the tin of this is the permission slip. And it's my belief that those people give you a permission slip to heal yourself, that the healing comes from within.
Well, yeah, and I would push back a little bit to say that it comes from self-permission, right? Like you have to give yourself the permission
yeah,
to do that. And so I can't give anybody permission, but I can, chat about what it would feel like if you gave yourself permission, and chat about what stagnation would happen if you don't. So I feel like that's kind of a good segue to talk about this unwinding concept.
Yeah. Let's talk
right?
about it, yeah.
So just, I use a lot of different frameworks. And one of the frameworks that I use is called the Quadrintity. It's from the Hoffman process. Maybe some of your listeners have gone there. I don't mean to plug them, but it's...
No, I'm familiar. I've heard them. It's powerful, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, and I think the reason why it's a powerful program is because it's experiential, right? And my whole reason for being here is to talk about the value of experiential medicine, whether that's a group experience or a medicine experience or an interactive experience with your doctor, but also like a yoga experience or a sound bath experience. Like, how do these things actually contribute to your health? So so the Quadrintity is about your intellect, your cognitive, and then your physical body, and then the third arena aspect is your emotional self, and then there's the fourth, which is your spiritual self. So it's like a diamond shape. And those aspects of self, I think, need more from us depending on what's happening, so you could be at the effect of your emotional self or physically in a lot of pain, or being an overthinker and being at the effect of your cognition, or you could be so deeply in your third eye that you can't see the trees for the forest, So I feel like there is this benefit of knowing your imprint, like how do you rebalance, or kind of set a balancing fulcrum between those 4 points, or draw from your spiritual energy if you need that because you're physically depleted, or ask your intellect to sit on a shelf while you ask your emotional self to work with your physical self, So it's a concept of sort of dividing ourselves into those 4 quadrants.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I wasn't. Yeah, I mean, I know mind, body, spirit. So it's basically also adding emotions to that aspect.
Yes, and I think that really, it really is aligned with how we see the neuroscience of it too. There's cognitive processes, there's emotional processes, there's this kind of sense of spirituality and connectivity that we're seeing when you have more of an entropic brain situation happen with medicine, and suddenly you have access to a spiritual sense of universality that sometimes you get when you're in nature, right? Or in awe and wonderment.
A mystical experience of some sort.
A mystical experience for sure. So I think, and some people have that with deep devotion too, with their prayer process, so, or even meditation process. So I think that in terms of the Quadrintity, that is what I am referring to as the spirit, or even the accessing creativity can also be a real spiritual experience. So that kind of rebalancing. And like I said, unwinding before, right? Yeah. If you're always going left, then you got to sometimes go right. Right? You got to unwind and regulate the connection to, usually it's a thought, like unwind a thought, or unwind a physical movement that you're doing repeatedly and it hurts.
Right. I was gonna just ask how, you talked about sort of cognitive, I identify with being very much in my head. I think many people in today's society would. How would you, and when you were describing the imbalance, what would be an example of, say, a cognitive imbalance versus an emotional imbalance versus a physical imbalance versus a spiritual imbalance?
Yeah. Well,
how do those manifest? What does that look like on the court?
Yeah. Well, so, based on the fact that I'm a clinical psychologist, then I can't deny that we have this very real syndrome called bipolar disorder. Right? I've seen this manifest in front of me. I can tell you that the state of consciousness and the presentation of the same person in these two different phases is incredibly different, and becomes cemented in place for a period of time that's difficult to unwind.
Right. Whichever side you're on, whichever pole you happen to be.
Exactly. It's like these concrete, concretized sorts of aspects of being. This mental status is very evident when you see it flagrantly, or even as you see it ramping up, right? So I feel like that is a different presentation, and that's when it's really helpful to have coordination between, say, a psychiatric prescriber and a therapist, and helping a person get out of this clinical emergency situation, right? That is costing a lot of money. It's creating hospitalizations. It could be creating arrests.
Right.
It puts people at great risk to their lives. They end up using all sorts of drugs. It can be very scary, or it can lead on the other side to risk of suicide and life-threatening behavior. So I want to emphasize that there is a clinical, in my opinion, very strong clinical need to care for people that are at that end of the spectrum of intervention, And that being said, I still like to deliver people into well-being and whole being accessibility, even if they also have that they're struggling with this kind of clinical issue. It improves their prognosis, it improves their experience, their quality of life, to engage their own healing mechanism, and it helps them not trigger that process. It prevents them from, it allows them to see when they're ramping into one of these biological swings, either mania or depression, and allows them to mindfully activate skill sets that they're developing to sort of delay the onset or prevent the onset, or to pull themselves back from a level of what we used to call neurosis winding up.
Yeah.
Right. So they unwind, they can mindfully unwind it on purpose. Yes.
Yeah. I had
it's this middle space.
Yeah. My late uncle suffered from bipolar for most of his adult life. And it was, it was terrible.
Yeah. It's really an interesting place to be able to do collaborative work with different professionals that are seeing the same person. So that's, I like the idea of just having greater level of collaboration with all of the fields of medicine, right? To chronic pain is another area of interest. When you have people that
So
are,
there's that would be physical,
yeah,
an over
yeah,
emphasis on the physical, right? I know. I can't think of the word right
yeah.
now.
So I'm curious. I think I read in your bio that you talked about fibromyalgia.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't diagnosed, but I was right there on the edge of that. My whole body was a rock, and I would go to I would get massages, almost weekly for 90 minutes.
Right.
And it was like she was chipping away at concrete and nothing was working. And then it was ultimately psychedelics and unwinding body memory recall with a myofascial person, Jonathan Tripodi, when the body literally began unwinding. And that was after a number of psychedelic journeys, including ayahuasca, MDMA, mushrooms, mescaline. Then I was still having pain, severe pain, and was still locked up. And it was, Jonathan kicked off an unwinding process in a 5-day intensive that I did right before the pandemic. And it was remarkable how much was stored in there.
Right. So that was through a physical process.
And it's a physical and a spiritual coaching. It's not just it's a collaborative. Like, back to your point, like we're talking about what's coming up. We would have an hour and a half conversation before I would go on the table, and he would work on me. And so he would prep the subconscious basically for what needed to come out.
That's interesting, is priming. We talked about that. I've talked about that just yesterday. I was with a group of people that were talking about priming the mind as by choice, right? You're priming the mind, and he's going to be working on your body, and your mind is primed to let all of that energy just get released through the process of him going in with his dosing session of the massage.
Of the massage,
Of the medicine of the massage.
Of the medicine of the massage. Yeah. Yeah. And and he would, sort of, you could look at it, the spiritual dimension was, setting up the container and burning the, sweetgrass and, the music and the whole, even going back to my first MDMA journey with a licensed trauma therapist who I went from a couple of pre-meetings with them in a normal psychologist's office with the sofa, and we sat down, and then I came in for the medicine day, and the tapestries were hung up, and the altar was set up, and the candles were burning, and I was like, whoa, I was new to this whole thing. I was like, whoa, what just happened? And when they read, the 4 directions prayer, and I got very emotional around Pachamama, and I was like, what the fuck is going on here? But it was this preparation, because there's an intelligence behind the intelligence, behind the perceived intelligence, that knows what's up, that knows what needs to be done. And it needs to be given permission. You need to give it permission.
So they built a portal for you.
It was a huge portal. It cured me. I had frozen shoulder that the traditional medicine hadn't touched. Cortisone shot. Could have been saline, as far as I was concerned. $1,200 saline shot, because it did nothing. But after an MDMA session, I realized that came from getting spanked as a child. Actually, it was after MDMA and ayahuasca that it came from getting spanked as a child. And from getting lifted up by the left arm. But after the MDMA session, the pain was gone. I still had a bit of restriction, a lot of restriction around the motion.
So you had like a memory of your arm being yanked up?
Yeah.
And you had this shoulder connected to the shoulder pain.
I could not move my arm without getting it would knock me to the ground if I got.
Well, it's very interesting. It's just, it's so undeniable. It's like, I've had psychologist friends that have written papers on endometriosis and like all sorts of, the amount of physical, demonstrable scar tissue that builds up after trauma to certain areas of the body. It's kind of undeniable that it's just not a coincidence that someone who has like sexual abuse is having a 95% higher percent chance of having endometrial issues or issues in the sacral region.
Yeah. I mean, it's Gabor Mate and van der Kolk, right? Body keeps a score, body says
Right.
no. I mean, there's energetic underpinnings to all this. And
Yes.
that's kind of my mission with this podcast is I think,
Sure.
I mean, after the MDMA thing, I thought, Jesus Christ, like if we could just get even 10% of the people that are currently seeing physicians for these things that are not, I mean, yes, they're manifesting as physical problems, but there's some energetic emotional component behind it. It doesn't come out of a vacuum.
Well, but I think the thing that's striking me, and it always brings me back to like the systems conversation, is that you're talking about people who have published, you're talking about people that teach, you're talking about like preeminent people in the field that understand these concepts, that put them through not just to the popular culture but to the clinical culture as well. This is known information. It's just not built into the system of care that's getting delivered to people.
Absolutely.
Right. So, or even built into the education on how much time, money, and quality of life it would save and protect if we integrated, the whole person concept into the system. And so I think that I wish I didn't care so much, but it bugs me that this is just, we're all a victim of how the payment model works. And if you're fortunate enough to go to concierge medicine, if you're fortunate enough to pay for what it is that you need and you want, and you happen to know what you need and want, then you can find that care,
Yeah.
But it's not going to be delivered at scale to the masses until something major infects the system or infuses the infected system.
Yeah, and I think it's really just about, I mean, it sounds trite, but it's about taking your power back, and it's not something that gets done overnight. And when I got into getting a concierge doctor, I didn't think I could afford it. When I found Jonathan Tripodi right before the pandemic, I didn't know how I was going to come up with the $2,500 to pay him and go to Sedona, but I did. It showed up. I threw my hat over the wall. I knew it in my body. I saw the interview with him. I was like, oh my God, I need that. I don't know how I'm going to make it happen. And so for me, it's been but it happened. And I actually went and I got trained with him, later, because I was so moved by the work. And so I mean, my message to people is like, anything is possible, and you don't have to give your power to a system that isn't helping you. Not because it's evil, not because it's a conspiracy. It's just what we've allowed to happen. And it's not like I'm not saying like overthrow it. I'm saying, how do we educate people to know there are alternatives?
Yeah. Well, I think that it's probably a multi-pronged approach and, challenging.
Mm-hmm.
I know that there are lots of people working on these things, and I think that this is part of it. You're on the wheel with all of the people, like putting a thumb on the side of consciousness, right? Like on the balancing the scales. But I think that as a consumer, as a person who goes to see whether it's a doctor or a facilitator or a provider of any kind, I think it's important to notice, observe how they care, how you need to be cared for, and how they're caring for you, and what kind of questions they're asking you, and whether or not they're curious about how you feel, and you know what I mean, like how you feel about it, right? Like the bigger context. And I think it's really hard for lots of clinicians to be able to have the time and space to ask the right questions, or to know how to weave that together. So as a human being, you can come in and say, well, this is what I need.
Right. This is what I think
I need. This is what I think I need. This is I don't know what's going on. I'm feeling confused, or I'm feeling in pain, and I don't know what it's connected to. And they're going to untangle the, imaging, but if they say, here, take this pill, you'll feel better. Right. If they say, here, take this pill, you'll feel better.
Right.
If you hear that,
If you hear that,
right?
right? That's
If you hear that,
non-magical phrase. that's the magic.
the question is not like yes, it's not like yes or no. Okay, yes, I will, or no, I won't. It's like, okay, explain why, right? Does it temporize the solution?
Mm-hmm.
Does it provide a solution that temporizes some pain or some inflammation or some rash or some presentation of some kind, and it will just make it go away, which is amazing. Like, that's awesome. It just goes away, right? But if you don't know what the origin of that rash was, or your chronic digestive problems, or your chronic, heartburn, or maybe your chronic lower back pain, or maybe, just an overall sense of burning in your entire body and you're not sure why, and, these symptoms that people have, I feel like, you want to understand the difference between temporizing medicine and going to the root cause, understanding the root cause. Because if you do understand the root cause, then you have some choices about maybe changing your behavior or your mindset about what puts you in that chronic condition in the first place, right? Like, if you're sitting at the desk the wrong way because you're not aware of your posture, right? Or if you're not moving enough in the course of your day, or if you're just eating too much dairy and you're allergic, you need to be,
or if you've got childhood trauma that you're not present to. I mean,
exactly.
Which so many,
especially that,
which so many people do. And, I wasn't present to it. I wasn't even present to the fact that I was sexually molested. That came out later through channeled work, but it totally aligned with the pelvic pain and the whole thing. And I burst it out during a 5-MeO session. Like, it was very clear that that's what happened. And the whatever they were giving me for the fibromyalgia, they gave me ciprofloxacin because they thought I had a bladder infection, and that was what kicked off the frozen shoulder because of the connective tissue tie-in. It was just a disaster, a disastrous chain.
Yes. And so what would have changed that? What would have been at the early part of that interaction, as the early part of that whole process, what might have been an alteration?
I guess if I look back on it, and my advice that I give to people often is, if you've had the imaging and you've done the diagnostic tests and you've seen 5 different people and you've seen specialists, and they cannot point to something physically specific
that's
off, it's probably not a medical issue. Like, there's something energetic, emotional, there's something behind it.
But the thing is that it is interesting because even though it's not measurable, it is an issue, whether you want to call it medical or clinic. It's still a clinical issue, right? It's a clinical issue that's affecting your fascia. It's affecting your mindset. It's affecting your behavior. It's affecting your inflammation throughout your entire central nervous system.
Right, but they couldn't, I had blood work that was off, but not crazy off, they were like the low liver function and the kidney function. It's all very subtle stuff. And I went to functional doctors, I went to integrative doctors, and they put me on restrictive diets, and then and vegan and all of this shit. And as it turned out, I needed meat was what my body needed. I went 3 years as a vegan, and then I went with meat. So it was really what turned the corner for me around. I'd been in therapy for a dozen plus years. I had been on antidepressants years before, and I had done personal growth work. I had done the whole landmark curriculum. I had sat a 10-day silent meditation retreat, and I'm talking to a buddy who's a little bit older, and he said, maybe it's psychological. I'm like, it's not. I've done all this, blah, blah, blah. Well, then my pelvic floor therapist happened to do a procedure where she made some marks. She touched the inside of my thigh. I burst into tears.
Okay.
I didn't know what it was, but I was like, okay, I think my buddy's right. This is emotional. That was what, and then that was what then like I said, I had done all the therapy, I had done that stuff. That was what tipped the scales for me to then begin to explore psychedelic medicine. And so,
Yeah. Well, it's a great opportunity to share that sort of experience with more people, because it's hard to hear someone that looks, and well, someone that looks like had this constellation of symptoms, that everything that you said, there were these unexplained medical symptoms, and none of the tests could point to anything specific, and so it becomes this handbasket term, like fibromyalgia, like, okay, you fit into this basket.
Pelvic floor disorder, right? Pelvic floor disorder was what,
right, and then yeah, or even if it's like something like so, like, it's basically, we call them sort of, well, we used to call them, I don't know if anybody uses this term anymore, but somatoform disorders, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or which is a form of conversion of symptoms from psychological to physical.
Interesting. Yeah.
Okay. You'd have people that would have a conversion disorder, and they would their anxiety would turn into fainting.
Yeah.
Right. So that was a clear allostatic, condition, right? You would see that somebody, so it's not that it's psychological or physical, because in somatic conditions and conversion conditions, they're paired.
It's both and.
I
mean, it was like my grandmother, she developed after my grandfather died, she couldn't move her hands anymore. She couldn't, especially her right hand, but both hands she couldn't. And it went to Mayo Clinic and did the whole thing. If I look back on it, and they kept saying, "Oh, it's all in your head." Well, of course, it's always all in your head, right? I mean, that's where everything comes together. But if I look at it, it was like, I think she was just tired of waiting on people. If I look at it energetically, she was always the one doing. She cut hair. She, raised two boys. My grandfather was, the typical, carpenter and man of the 50s, and she was, and what it allowed her to do is let people wait on her for the rest of her life.
Because she couldn't use her
hands. And she lived happily. Yeah. She moved into a home, and she kind of ran the home because she was mentally very, very sharp.
Right.
But she
was meant for other things.
She was meant for other things. Yeah.
And her body knew it.
So, I mean, today, could she drop, some mushrooms and get to the bottom of it? I don't know, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, so, yeah, I just think about the thing that you said about your subtle levels everywhere. Like, you had a little bit of off here, a little bit of off here. And that is interesting because we're talking about the subtle body. Mm-hmm. I think that when we talk about the subtle body, and a lot of other traditions, indigenous traditions talk about that, and just like flow of energy through your body, and moving chi, and warming up your chi, and and just this is all very relevant to the kind of clinical conditions that we're talking about here. Yet the answers, the experiential medicines that are most able to access the subtle body illnesses, right, that are mind-body connected, are also mind-body medicines, right? They're mind-body experiences. They're experiences that say, oh, like, okay, your issue is in the mind-body, so let's address the mind-body directly. Right?
When you're speaking of like something like ketamine or MDMA or those kind of medicines,
or dance,
or dance,
art,
or Tai Chi,
or movement,
Qigong,
or Tai Chi,
right.
It's Qigong,
yep.
exactly,
yep.
or playing in a band, whatever works for you, right? Just whatever works for people in their affinity and their, what they're drawn to. And so finding a person's own creative intelligence and their connection to their creative energy and their access to awe and wonderment and joy, and what in the IFS world we call the 8 C's: your connection, your creativity, your clarity, your calm, your confidence, your courage. I'm missing 2. That's okay. Yeah. You'll go back. But those are like
IFS being internal family systems, just for the
internal family. Yes, like your resources. Yes, your resources, your if yourself was able to be its most authentic presentation, it would be curious and confident and clear and calm and creative and compassionate and self-compassionate, all the C's. And what gets in the way of that are life and minutia and pain and trauma and all the parts
shame
that
and anxiety
come up.
and
Yes, right. The parts, and each one of those parts has a different kind of embodiment sensation. So sometimes when we go through parts and we identify the parts that are coming up for people that are driving the bus of people's emotional or social or relational lives, professional lives, and we're doing that kind of parts work and that shadow work with people, I want to know how that part felt somatically, physically, spiritually, physically, emotionally, intellectually. What is the constellation of that part? Get to know that part really well. So when it shows up in your physical body, when you're like, oh wow, that's the map I have for my 11-year-old abused part. Right? I feel it in my body. You can be mindful of when those experiences are coming into the subtle body. And you're like, oh, okay. I can trace this path. Something happened in my context, in my conversation that kind of triggered this part of me.
Woke this part up.
Woke this part up, and maybe before you can think it or feel it, you might experience as a physical pain in your neck, right? Or an upset stomach, or something like that. For some people that are particularly somatic about it, then it would be important to know, what the physical manifestation is in terms of where it started. When did you first have that gastric symptom, right?
Yeah, what was it tied to?
Or that.
So how? So you mentioned IFS. So how do you work with people specifically? Are you working one-on-one? Do you have group work? What is your how do you engage with
I should
clients?
pick a lane, huh?
No, you don't have. I'm just curious.
No, I mean, I do supervision. So I have clinicians that work under my license and with me.
Yeah.
And so I do some training and education for other clinicians that are kind of founded in psychotherapy, but that are interested in experiential medicine applications and approaches to that work, whether they're, and, sometimes, clinicians come in and they're more interested in working with a particular niche like neurodivergence or couples or, men of a certain age or whatever it is, certain cultures. So I think in this next round of hiring, looking for other associates that want to come into the practice, that looking for people that are really interested in doing experientially assisted work in one form or another and having an interest in doing more credentialing and training in the non-ordinary states of consciousness types of medicines and experiential applications that we use. Because even breath work counts as a non-ordinary, state of consciousness. So we like to sort of build custom or bespoke programs for people so they're amenable to them, but also have a network of referrals to people that are doing group work and other kinds of medicine work in our spaces. So really try to be as integrated as possible as an organization, right? Like to try to practice what we preach in terms of integration and building bridges to other providers that do this important work, because we can't do it all. Right.
Yeah.
Nor should we try.
Right. Well, we might try, but it doesn't usually work. So you did say that at your practice you do offer ketamine-assisted therapy.
We do ketamine-assisted psychotherapy. I'm trained in MDMA-assisted psychotherapy. I went through the MAPS training program a couple of years ago, and I've done lots and lots of trainings, and both receiving new learning all the time, every day. I love learning, and I love being using my beginner's mind as often as possible. But I've also done some training and some supervision of other clinical staff. But I'm also kind of like an entrepreneur and an innovator, and I really like, the idea of building some somatic technology, art, creative intelligence interface AI thing. I
Okay.
mean, I know it sounds crazy, but I would like to be able to make something called synesthesia tools
Oh,
where
yeah.
you're really learning embodiment through practice in sort of virtual spaces and rhythmicity signatures. I'm interested in rhythm and vibration and how sound can really be a medicine for the subtle body and
Yeah. So,
awaken healing intelligence.
yeah, sound and music is
Mhm.
profound, especially
Mhm.
in non-ordinary states of consciousness.
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
the first, I mean, my first big mushroom trip,
It can be the ghost in the machine.
yeah, 100%. I mean, my first mushroom trip was I threw on Pink Floyd's The Wall because I didn't know any better.
Right.
And amazing to where that took me.
Mhm.
But then after the MDMA therapy, like my musical world just exploded. The stuff that I was interested in and the experiences that I had with the music in my body.
Right. Yeah.
So just talk for a minute about because I think ketamine has had this sort of interesting trajectory of like going from the underground and kind of an anesthetic, and then it became
Yeah.
very popular, and then we had unfortunate Matthew Perry. But where do I have my own opinions on it, having worked with it a bit at the later part of my journey? Where do you see it as? We talked a little bit in our preparatory thing, about a decision support tool, about the right fit, about red flags. Where do you see its most powerful indication? Like who are the best candidates for it?
Yeah.
Have the best
Well,
outcomes?
yeah. I mean, in my experience, we have used it as a tool to support psychotherapy,
Okay.
right? So we will um, we've been talking about dreams for a long time in my field,
Ever
right?
since
Like,
young, right?
Since Freud,
Or
actually.
Freud,
So,
right? Yeah.
so we've been talking about dreams and dream analysis and what is dreaming, and I've been interested in dreaming since I was a graduate student, and the idea of lucid dreaming and being aware of what you're dreaming when you're dreaming it, and why do we dream and how do we dream, and so many neuroscientists have brilliantly described to me how their view on dreaming, and yet we have this interpretive projective element of the story, of the narrative that comes through every night with people that are sort of spilling their subconscious to themselves in this really slippery way that you can't quite grasp. You can't remember all the
Right.
details
Yeah,
when you're through, and that's sort of like ketamine, right? There's this, but it's like it's lucidity with it. It's more lucidity. It's almost okay. And I don't know if this is experience. This is the experience that everybody has, but for many of the people that I've worked with, it's a non-specific amplifier of what's there already, just like many of the psychedelic medicines are non-specific amplifiers. So I think that when you have that dream content or that subconscious content coming to the surface, it always is going to float. There's going to be day residue. Like, oh, you might be in a grocery store because you were in the grocery store earlier that day, right? There's certain elements of the dream that are just like leftover day residue. So there's always that, but then there's also the music that you're talking about. And when you put the music in this setting, you have a real sort of responsibility to make it about the music.
Okay.
Right? Like instead of about the person. So I think that it's important not to unintentionally prime something, or if you're going to prime something, make sure it's aligned with the person's intentions. Right? Like if they're looking for more regulation, then I usually use more regulating music, right? If they really want to deal with like this 11-year-old part and she's got like rage issues, then we might want something you know what? You never know,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
So sometimes if you're able to create music that is bespoke like that for people, it can be helpful. But it's always good to get feedback afterwards, right? In the integration process. But the dream content, the ketamine, I think, offers an opportunity to lift some subconscious material to the surface to then be able to process with a, a trained
Therapist. Yeah.
therapist, or to be able to connect that to the issues that you've been unearthing in your preparation sessions and in previous integration sessions. Like, okay, so how do we make meaning of this subjective content that came to the surface, projective content that came to the surface? And it sort of expedites the surfacing of subconscious content that would occur in a regular session, right? It expedites the process.
But over the course of maybe 12 sessions or 10 sessions, or like
maybe. Or some people have such buried stuff, like you're saying, it's so buried in the fascia, right? That there's, I've seen people release grief of a lost family member that they had never released before,
because they didn't give them permission at some level to release it. It was being held.
Exactly. So that was unusual, because most people find it to be really pleasant, the experience, but I've seen people have good experience, but it was about releasing grief. It was about releasing something that needed to be released, or sometimes it's about just, what does it feel like to be in your self body, like your joyful self body, like, or your non-pain feeling self body, like a relieved body. So because it has the added benefit
of the anesthesia.
Yes. So the analgesic effect is paired with the music. Like, okay, now this is the imprint,
right?
A new imprint, right? That kind of leaves a residue in the subtle mind body after.
It's like It's like you're saying to the body, here's what's possible.
Here's what's possible.
Here's what's possible. Now, what do we need to do who we need to be? What do we need to do in normal consciousness?
Right.
To
right.
Work
or how do I
towards
bring this? Yeah. Or how do I kind of bridge the gap between normal consciousness and non-ordinary consciousness with expanded, dilated mindfulness?
Mm-hmm.
Or an interoception and a mindfulness process.
And when you guys, when you're doing the ketamine sessions, the therapist is there with them throughout the experience.
Yes, usually. Yes, usually that's the way we do it. I mean, there are applications where I don't think it's the safest way to do self-guided sessions, and that process only occurs after someone's knows the medicine very well, and you are, but one way or the other, the process of ketamine is relatively short.
Yeah.
So being with that person is like holding space, and sometimes there's a lot more interaction than you would expect, but they're usually invited to just receive and be with that medicine. But of course, if something comes up that needs to be processed, or if they have dexterity enough to draw something, or create something, then I've seen that happen. And then on really low doses with sort of
barely perceptual.
Yes, well, it's perceptual, but it's it's just a lighter dose where there's more conversation possible. I've had a colleague of mine work with couples in that way that allows them to have a different kind of conversation with each other. And also, like you said, primed, priming those experiences with orienting sessions before you go into that work together, and then being able to process that and integrate that afterwards. And it's a co-regulation process, I would say.
Yeah. So what's your advice in terms of if people are, because it's in the zeitgeist, people are aware of ketamine thing, what are sort of green flags and red flags that you would have people, look for in when they're selecting a practitioner? I mean, I have my own
Yeah.
opinions, but you have a lot more expertise about it than I do.
Well, yeah, I don't have a handy list here. I wish I did, because I'll come up like 10 more things afterwards. But like, I think that the biggest green flag is that you're comfortable, that you trust this person, and that they have answered all your questions, and that you don't feel pressured, or that if you wanted to say, you know what, I'm not ready, that, that would be okay.
Yeah.
Right. And
they're not a car salesman. Like, we need to close this by the end of the month. Yeah.
Right. Or that you trust them, and that they trust you, that they trust that you can do this, right? That they see that you are ready. So there's that. And also, that you've gone over safety things. Like, I don't want you to stand up, right? Like, stay seated, right? And I'll help you to the bathroom. And they've asked their permission. You've gotten permission to touch them if they need support. Like, if they are in a vulnerable position or needing some extra physical contact, that you've had that conversation, you've gotten consent in advance to be able to support them and what you will do and what you won't do, just safety procedures, because things have gone wrong. We've seen what happens when they do go wrong and people feel unsafe or exploited in some way. So I feel like that sense of safety is really critical, and that's the biggest thing that I would look for is your own intuitive sense that this is the right thing for you to be doing. But also, it's always good to know that the people that you're working with are doing their own work.
Great
right?
point.
Like
Ask that
they're
question.
actually,
like, how often do you go to therapy? Right? How often? Yeah.
Right. Exactly. I mean,
have
you could
tried,
ask that.
right? Have you tried ketamine? Right.
Exactly. I feel like you need to be able to get an indicator of their authentic connection to this growth oriented work, or especially if it's trauma work, that they feel like they understand what trauma informed care means. And I think that the other risk, and this is in no way, shape, or form meant to be critical of anybody in the field that's not clinical, because these things go wrong even in clinical spaces. But countertransference and transference issues are also incredibly important. And if you're a less experienced clinical guide, or if you're a less experienced guide that's not clinical at all, and you don't know what the actual meaning of transference and countertransference is, I would say that that's the number one thing to learn about, because you represent something to that person in the room, and they'll be in a vulnerable position. And that means that, you could be, you can be triggered.
Right. Because suggestions, you're very suggestible.
You're suggestible. You don't know exactly what you represent to that person. You don't know what their abuser looked like, or why they were drawn to you, or whether there's a power dynamic or a gender issue going on, or a cultural framework that you're not completely understanding their perspective on, or even your own perspective on. Until it presents you.
Yeah. So just talk, if you can define transference and then countertransference for the crowd here. How would you?
Okay, so like if a person is
a patient, this would be
say a patient or a client is coming to you, and they have issues with controlling women.
Like, so you have a male,
right? Like, a male bodied person,
and they have
right, or they have or like I don't know, someone with narcissistic tendencies, or some sort of a manipulative abuser in their mind, and they are a woman of a certain age, right? And if I am a woman of a certain age, right, or if I say something that is inadvertently
seemingly benign, seemingly
benign, or even, it's like they might be having a reaction to me that has to do with these other factors other than what I've said,
and that's transference.
So that's transference. But in a therapeutic relationship, we talk about that, right? That's actually explicit. We're actually having a process oriented conversation about, like, what happened in our rupture there? What happened when you canceled last minute? Or what happened when I said that and you got teary?
Right. I said X and you got angry or sad or.
Right. Like you're actually doing this transactional work, analysis work right in time. It's process work. So that's because there is transference, and it's important to know what it is because we work at it's a tool. It's part of the work, right? It's not something to be avoided, it's just is.
And
countertransference is the opposite. It's how I'm feeling
as a therapist.
I'm working with as a therapist, and this person is representing something like in my life that's like real,
a former spouse or partner or boss or something,
right? Or if they're talking about having their parents getting divorced at age 7, right? Like suddenly I'm like, oh, I know that.
I know what that feels like for me.
Right, exactly. Which is it's a benefit to my role as a therapist to be able to be have empathy about this, but it also could suck me into believing that that they're just like me, or they should do it the way I did it, or something like that. So you have this training in psychotherapy school, right? Whatever degree that you have, is that these concepts are rich and relevant in relationships that have a power dynamic, and they do.
And the medicine only amplifies the power dynamic.
It amplifies that, and it could potentially exploit those things if you don't know what they are, if you haven't named them, and as the holder of the space, it's your responsibility to know that, not your clients.
Not the clients. So it's right. So if it to kind of put a bow, I mean, one thing that comes to mind for me is a therapy practice who's basically you're gonna call them, make an appointment, you're gonna go in for the first time, and they're gonna put you in the chair and give you ketamine. Probably a red flag.
Probably a red flag, in my opinion.
Because you don't have a therapeutic alliance, you don't have a relationship, you don't know the therapist.
And you don't. Where's the prep session? Like, what do you do? Right? Like, what are you working on? What are you trying to address here? Right? Is it your chronic pain in your hip? Is it your major depressive disorder? Persistent type. And where are you in the healing mechanism? Where is your contribution coming into the treatment plan?
Yeah.
Right. Where is the consumer's role in their healing journey if they just said, okay, doc, plug me in?
Right. Hook me up.
Right. So hook me up.
Yeah.
Right.
Fix me.
Fix me.
Yeah.
Right. That's the red flag.
Yeah.
That's it.
Which is
when you are saying fix me because you're desperate to be fixed.
Yeah. Which is what I think.
And someone says, yeah,
come in and we'll do that. Friday at 2.
Right.
Which is
I'll temporize your pain.
Yeah. Which I think points to the potential problems with some of the at-home treatments, where here we'll send you these troches without any kind of consultation, and you're going to suck on ketamine in your bedroom for an hour.
Yeah. I don't know those guys. That's not the way that I do it.
Right.
I think that we're trying to make it accessible to more people, and mail order and sometimes being in your own home is helpful. Sometimes being in the therapist's office is helpful, but whatever the therapeutic relationship is that's established and it's safe and there's an alliance there, you can have a coordinated prescriber working with as like a third member of that dyad. So there's a prescriber there and there's a collaborative conversation there, and you're tracking it and you're documenting that in a shared portal.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't
some sort of.
I didn't mean to say that it was a blanket, red flag at home is bad, but this prep work, this priming of the pump, if you will, and then the support after the fact, because big things can come out of these sessions.
Well, I think that's I think that's where we see durability, because you're going to change your mind. These medicines, especially if they're longer form medicines and you're spending 6 or 8 hours in an experiential state, you have a longer neuroplastic window
Right.
to make more changes and integrate more changes. But what are those changes? And this offers partnership in that process to say, okay, let's figure this out together, right?
Yeah.
Let's
And
see you get your mind body integration working through the emotion, the spirit, the physical, and the intellectual.
Right. As opposed to like, I go on the web and I go click, 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 and they send ketamine to me and I trip on the ketamine for a little while and then I go back to my life. I mean,
It probably would be enjoyable, but I don't know if it'll be a treatment.
Effective. Yeah. I mean, I found that my first mushroom experience when I kind of broke through the portal and I thought, oh, okay, my body's flailing all over the place and I'm seeing the great light and it was very beautiful. And then I went back to my life and I didn't have a therapist at the time. I didn't do anything different and my pain continued.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. Case in point. I think that we all need a little help, and maybe I'm not that religious about which kind of practitioner anyone needs. I think it really, people have liberty to shop around and find their right experts. I just think that across the board, whether you're licensed or not, certain ethics and concepts ought to be fundamental.
Sure. Yeah.
In my opinion.
Beautiful. Yeah. No, I agree. And that's part of the, sort of the mission of this podcast is to make, to date, I think you're the only second person that I've had on the show that I haven't actually worked with. There's been, I don't know, 15 or 16 episodes and I've worked with all of those people in some way, shape or form. But it's to bring these caring souls out and make people aware of them.
Yeah. I'd like to see a different kind of clinic of the future.
Yeah. What does it look like?
It looks like experiential prescriptions, right? Like it looks like a place to parse what you need, who can help, and have a multimodal, multidisciplinary team that talks to each other, that can send you on a path, on a healing journey that involves a set of kind of linked professionals that work together in different spaces.
And that experiential prescription might be, you're going to do 5 rhythms dance every Sunday. Right. Or you're going to,
if that's the thing that they need, they might, because they might prefer to go do sculpture every Wednesday,
which is great.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. But
or depending on what they're getting out of it, it really depends. Or actually even who's regionally available, who's accessible, who's doing what's calling to you, who's out there doing something that you can experiment with.
Yeah.
So what wakes up your mind, body, and kind of teaches you about you. So having a group of collegial, interprofessional, sensation-based practitioners that are doing somatic work and tethered to traditional medicine seems an ideal opportunity to make a bridge, to build bridges.
I look forward to coming to your clinic like that when it's open.
Okay, it's an aspiration. We're going to have to pull it together with some focus. I need to get focused.
It's the year of the fire horse. Let's go.
I know.
Giddy up.
Giddy up.
Right.
Yeah. No, I am definitely I'm a cuspy Sagittarian. I'm a solstice baby. I am very familiar with the fire. So, yeah.
Well, amazing. Jodie, thank you so much for being on, taking the time. It's really been a pleasure to chat with you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, explore all these fun things. I can talk about this stuff all day. I love it.
Yeah, well, hopefully you will help shift some systemic mindsets out there.
Yeah, I hope so.
Okay.
All right. Thanks
Thank you so much, Matt.
You bet.
I appreciate it.